All right, Kansas City Chiefs, the AFC representative for the Super Bowl. So you think they're pretty well set, and for the most part, they are, especially because they have a lot of star talent all over the place that mitigates how much you need other players to contribute. But they do have some legitimate holes as well. And unfortunately for them, they only have 4.5 million in effective cap space, which is the space you have after drafting your draft and also filling out your roster to 53 players. So the needs, this is in order of most to least important for them. I would say is tackle slash guard, depending on what you want to do with Joe Tooney. I'm prioritizing tackle because I think Tooney is a better guard than he is a long term tackle option. Wide receiver, edge rusher, guard, and defensive tackle. Don't get your hopes too high for big splashy moves because again they have $4.5 million right now. They could get more if Kelsey retires before his bonus kicks in, or if they restructure players. But I don't want to make this too complicated. I just want to kind of look at things through the lens of where they are now and what they can reasonably get done. So the first player I want to bring in is Jedrick Wills Jr., the left tackle for the Cleveland Browns. Yes, he's been injured and bad in the past 2 years, but he would still be an upgrade with upside over Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamatea. So I like bringing in Wills because his projected contract is 1 year, $3 million, very affordable. Especially offensive tackle is a premium position, so just getting any run of the mill guy is going to cost you at least $3 million. And with Wills, he was drafted in the first round for a reason, so there's potential there. And additionally, even if he doesn't work out, you're solidifying the room and you get a good backup tackle for basically nothing. So that's the first move. The second is Deontay Johnson, who is another player that has some real concerns with him. He incites a lot of drama, and he's done it on good teams, so that's particularly worrisome because he was a problem for the Ravens and the Texans. In the case of the Texans, they're a playoff team, and the Ravens, they're one of the three best for sure in the AFC. So Johnson is very worrisome in that regard, but that's the reason the Chiefs can afford to bring him in because Johnson would be commanding, I don't know, maybe like 20 million a year if he weren't a red flag, but instead he's projected to make 1 year, 3 million. So I bring him in just as a flyer, basically say this is your last chance, bud. If you can't make it here, you can't make it anywhere. So bring him in, get a great route runner perhaps, and a different style of receiver than what they currently have. Rashee Rice is a great slot option. He can really run routes at a high level and has good hands. So he's basically everything you want in a receiver. He's not too athletic, but that's fine. But Rice is doing his work in the slot. Deontay Johnson is a true outside receiver, so he can play off of Rice nicely. You could put them on the same side and provide trouble for defenses that way. You can, put them on opposite sides, have two options on either sides of the field. It could be very tricky to defend the Chiefs if Johnson gets going. And then Worthy, he, I think, is kind of similar to Johnson in that Johnson's not much of a deep threat. And Worthy, he definitely should be because he's like the fastest dude in the NFL. I mean, he tracked as the fastest 40 time ever. But he's not too much of a deep threat so far. So he's kind of working the intermediate parts of the field. So Johnson's doing a similar thing. But I think they can play off of each other nicely. It's kind of having two positives and not too much of a negative with them overlapping because, being able to run intermediate routes, the Chiefs have found a way to get by without too much of a deep threat, and I think they continue doing that with Johnson. The third player I want to talk about is edge rusher Derek Barnett, who is not going to impress you with his stats, but that's mainly because he wasn't getting a ton of reps. And when he did play, he was making pretty impactful plays a lot of the time. And I think overall he's a really good scheme fit with what the Chiefs want because they do value big bodies on the defensive line, especially at edge rusher. I think more than a lot of teams, they like powerful guys that can push the pocket and make things difficult to move around for the quarterback. So Barnett, he fits that perfectly. He's very powerful. He's not the most athletic, but he's very strong. So he can do what the Chiefs want. Stat wise, like I said, not the greatest. He was 94 out of 135 in edge rusher pressures and 75th out of 135 in stops, which is basically just an effective tackle where if you stop or if you get a tackle on 1st and 10 for say 2 yards, that would be a stop. And if you get a tackle on 3rd and 15 for 5 yards, that could also be a stop. So those are some examples of what a stop looks like. Barnett, doesn't have the greatest stats, but again, pretty efficient overall. He would be brought in for 1 year, 4.25 million. That seems like, maybe a little bit more than the other guys for what his production is. But again, edge rusher is a very premium position where, the top guys are making, 10 times that amount. So it's, I think pretty reasonable for what he is. The next player I like is Coleman Shelton. He was the center for the Bears this past year, which is a little bit icky. I know the Bears' offensive line does not have a good perception whatsoever, but he was pretty solid. And he can be the right guard for Trey Smith, who I think is just going to have to go, unfortunately. It's not that Smith is bad, but, they just don't have enough money to pay everybody. And especially at a position like guard where, you're not the most valuable for the offensive line even. And especially with Mahomes, he can get rid of the ball very quickly. He can navigate pressure well. That's not to say you want to, not have a good offensive line, but you can't have the best player at every position and, pay everybody. So Shelton, he can come in for Smith, and I like that Shelton has the Tooney sort of traits of being able to move around the line. Shelton can't move to tackle like Tooney can, but Shelton was 12th out of 40 centers per PFF. And I think that's more than good enough, really. So he would command a 2-year, $5 million per year contract. And I think that's really honestly a steal. And so too with this contract, Poona Ford. I love him as a defensive tackle. He's not the most ideal fit in that he's a little bit undersized for a defensive tackle, but he is somebody that plays well above his size, and he's rather athletic. He has good leverage to him as well. So he could be a very good contributor. He was 39th in stops for defensive interior and 47th in pressures. And he's only expected to make 1 year, 3.5 million for his contract. I think that's an absolute steal if you get him for that. He was a very good defensive tackle for the Chargers this year. And, maybe he doesn't repeat as that quality of a defensive tackle, but man, if he can be, somewhat near that, He's going to be a player that really adds a lot of value to the Chiefs and does so for, basically no money. Overall, I think if the Chiefs make these moves, they're going to be in a prime position to get back to the Super Bowl again and perhaps actually put up a fight this time. Those are my thoughts on what the Chiefs should do this offseason. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more NFL content.